New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to Saturday Science of Mind Conversation and Lecture Series. We're so glad you're here today, and it is such a wonderful day to be alive, and we are excited that you are here. I'm Rev Z, and it is my privilege to be here today to kind of walk through and talk through and look at this thing called physical perfection. We're looking at chapter 14 today, and we really want to understand what Ernest is teaching here about physical perfection. So we're looking at pages 190 through that should be 214. And before we get started, let's just take a deep breath right here and center ourselves. And so as we create this space for knowing and understanding and stepping into physical perfection, knowing that all there is the divine mind of the creative source that created all things, that moves through all things, that elevates all things and allows us to be more than we ever thought we could be. And so right here, we take a breath and we release any tension or anything that blocks the divine flow as we step into this moment fully, wholly, and boldly as expressions of the Most High. And so it is. Amen. And so it is. Amen. Good morning. Good morning. I want to say good morning to Shay as she jumps in with us, and as we get this ball rolling. So I want to first remind everyone that as we begin to engage in our everyday life, the vehicle, the modus operandi for moving through life is our physical presence. We have our consciousness, but that consciousness is moving on this plane through a physical body, our physical vehicle. And so we're going to start this morning by looking at, this is the working title that I'm working with right here. So let's just look at that and think about physical perfection, activating wholeness through a mind-body awareness. Because what we are trying to achieve is to elevate ourselves, our minds, our body, our total presence as the thing itself, which we are a representative of. And so when we begin to think in this holistic way, we allow all parts of our body to sink in, all parts of our mind to sink in, our spirit, our soul to to create this wonderment, if you will, of who and what we are. Now, Ernest says real quickly on page 190, he says this. He says, man's life in reality is spiritual and mental. And until his thoughts is healed, no form of cure will be permanent. We understand that health is mental as well as physical state. It's a mental and physical state. So right at the very beginning, we get this understanding that we are in a place that is both physical and mental, right? Which speaks to wholeness, right? When these two things are joined together, we are approaching wholeness. Then we just have to put them in right alignment to the laws of the universe and allow us that we are moving in a way that allows us to reveal the healing. Now, Shay is saying, I'm aware that I'm in excruciating pain, and we get that. But as we begin to reflect on our thoughts and reflect on our behaviors, right? Because we know everything starts in consciousness, but we also know that we have to align ourselves with the laws of the universe to fully activate the power of God that's in us. And so when we look at this next slide, I think it sets the tone for what we're looking for. It sets the tone. Activating wholeness, meaning explore the concept of physical perfection, recognizing the relationship between thought or mind and body, and the aim for aligning or alignment with the divine. That's the key, is to how do we align with the divine? Because when we look at perfection through the mind of awareness, it emphasizes the importance of understanding how our thoughts affect our well-being and sets the stage for the rest of the living, if you will. Holmes teaches us this. Ernest teaches us this. Ernest says, the physical body is the result of mental and spiritual patterns. The body reflects the beliefs and thoughts held in the subconscious mind. If those beliefs are aligned with truth, the body expresses health. If not, it manifests disease. So, what are we talking about here? We're looking at a process, if you will, a realization is a better word, of how do we begin to activate this wholeness? Well, the first thing we have to understand that in the beginning, God created heaven and earth and said everything in it was good and perfect. So we know in our original state that we were created in the image and likeness of God, and it was perfect. That's how we expressed ourselves. That's how we tapped in and tuned in and turned on to the divine mind of God. But as we begin to be culturated in this world of appearances, this world of illusions in some cases, we begin to lose that connection between mind and body. Now, like right now, we can recognize this relationship between mind and body. And if we just take a deep breath and release it, right away, you begin to notice a settling of the body, a ease, a release of tension. And if we do that all day, when we're aware of it, when we're aware of ourselves being in tension, it's a mental idea. How we relax, we take the breath, we hold it for a moment or two, and then we let go of the tension. We let go of anything that's stopping that energy flow. It's like, you remember when you were a kid and you were outside maybe playing with the water hose, and when you put a crimp in the water hose, the water reduced in its outflow. But that crimp, that part that kept the energy from flowing, the water came out full force. And that's what we are doing when we look at this idea of physical perfection, as Ernest talks to us about. This idea of physical perfection, where we are exploring the concept of it, today, and then we want to recognize the relationship between mind, body. There's tons of work done on mind, body. You can just go to the internet and validate what Ernest and so many other master teachers taught long ago in this idea of our thoughts affect our reality, which includes our body. And then the aim of all of this is to align with the divine mind of God for healing or for health and wholeness. And so that's what we're looking at. That's what we're striving to do, is to move into this place where we begin to reveal the wholeness that we are. The wholeness that we are. Now, once we do that, we move into this place of understanding the spiritual reality, or understanding how that works, right? So physical perfection is a spiritual awakening. Our thoughts shape our physical reality. And aligning with divine mind is essential for health. Essential for health. So the idea here is that physical perfection is rooted in spirituality. By aligning our thoughts with the divine mind, we can restore balance and heal our bodies with these teachings, with these practices. And that's what we're being asked to do. We're being asked to have a right mind. And as we do that, then we do what? We step into right action, right? We talk about right action. So once I have the divine mind idea, I step into right action, which means I align myself with proper eating and proper exercise and proper awareness of my environment. Just to show you about a spiritual idea or a mental concept that affect, if you step into a room that is light and bright, that is orderly and organized, and things are in some kind of order or place, when you step into that, your mind, your vision picks up an image and energy of that room, and you feel a certain way. Now, if you step in a room of just the opposite, that's messy, that's not well lit, that things are just everywhere, your whole body reacts to it. So right away, we begin to see how the idea, the consciousness, the awareness of the mental faculties, if you will, begin to shape how we feel. Shape how we feel. And that is a tall order for us to begin to recognize that, as we said in the beginning, this idea of wholeness includes everything, because we know there is no separation. Everything is connected. You may have had that song when you were a kid, or your grandkids or your nephews or whatever may have that song from kindergarten, where they're teaching the bone structure, and they say the foot bone is connected to the ankle bone, and the ankle bone to the leg bone, and to the knee bone, and all the way up until everything is connected. But each one of those parts that connect to make you also have its own independent function, purpose, and autonomy, if you will. And so that's what Ernest is teaching us, I believe, in this physical perfection, is that when we look at nature, when we look at how we have been magnificently created, we see right away that there's a connection of everything. And when we can visually, mentally, and physically and emotionally understand that connection, we begin to release. We begin to allow the mind of God, this divine spirit, to move through us, to move through us. So now I want to stop right there and see if there's anybody with any questions. If you have any questions, put them in the chat. If you have any statements, comments, put them in the chat. This is a dialogue. This is how we engage that divine mind, by asking questions, by making statements, by allowing ourselves to understand this activity called perfect health. Okay? So if you have any comments, please bring them forward. Now, when we look at this understanding spiritual reality, we understand these factors. All is mental, that our reality is shaped by our thoughts, and that when we align with the divine mind, we move into another era of understanding, another way of being. And once that happens, we begin to look at these core principles of health. These core principles of health, where perfect health resides in divine mind. Disease stems from mental patterns. And then we see that the mind directs the body's health. The mind directs the body's health. And so here Ernest affirms that there is a perfect spiritual prototype or pattern of the human body in God's mind. This is the idea form for health, order, and function, regardless of appearances. This perfect idea is always present and accessible. It's always present and accessible. This perfect idea. Now, the question becomes, how do we, or at least one of the questions, how do we find ourselves and put ourselves in alignment with this perfect idea, this perfect spiritual prototype, right? You think about the idea of a prototype. When we look at all of the amazing events, inventions that we have in our life, whether it's the car or the airplane or the refrigerator or some engineering feat, the first thing we know when an inventor goes to create something, they create the prototype, which is a perfect idea that they've taken from the conscious awareness and put into a physical facsimile. And then once they do that, the job becomes, how do I create the physical entity that matches this perfect idea? And that's what we're dealing with when we're looking at our relationship with God and divine, and the prototype of man and woman and health and healing and wholeness when we begin to move in this way. Now, some people might say, well, I got a little pain in my shoulder, right? I was in an accident, and sometimes that shoulder flares up. But when I begin to think about the connective tissue and the bone structure and begin to breathe and focus on that healing, we know from the neural network study that has been done in the brain that immediately when we do that, from a mental image, we to that shoulder, we begin to send more as they would say, chi energy or spiritual energy to that shoulder. And if we can hold that for 60 seconds, just 1 minute, if we can hold that idea and that breathing pattern and that thought of healing for 60 seconds, it gets better. And then we advance to another 30, another 60, another 30, another 60. And before you know it, we can sit there in a short amount of time, 10, 15, 20 minutes of just feeling the presence of the divine, we can begin to experience a difference in our awareness of our bodies, in the difference in the awareness of pains that may be residing in our bodies. And so that is our that is how we want to live our life, really, in every day, every way, right? It's to be reflective of this idea, to understand that we are our thoughts. We are accumulation of our thoughts that are reinforced by our actions. And so when we reflect on the mind in the body operates based on subconscious beliefs. Our physical state reflects our mental state. Ernest Holmes says the body is an effect, not a cause, right? He discusses how the body is not self-operating, but rather a reflection of our subconscious. By recognizing this, we can better understand how our thoughts and beliefs impact our health. Ernest Holmes says this: the body is the logical and necessary outcome of the self-contemplation of spirit. The outcome of this contemplation of spirit. And now when we understand that, and when we move in that kind of a pattern every day, we begin to awaken to a new way of being, a new way of living, a new way of expressing our body. Because, Ernest says that disease happens when we allow our bodies to fall, or our minds really, to fall into separation or fear or disbelief or limitation. These mental patterns disrupt the harmony of the body. They disrupt the flow of energy. Just like when we crimp that water hose, we restrict the flow. And we know that healing happens when we align the mind and allow it to reveal the truth. And as we continue to do our spiritual practices, and as we continue to keep our mind in tune, we begin to reflect these ideas of healing. And we understand that a physical state is a reflection of a mental state. If you wake up or something happened at work and you're tense and stressed, you come home and, oh, my back hurts. Oh, my pain in my arm. We begin to see how these mental states affect our body. But as soon as you can relax, you say, oh, I'm going to go home and I'm going to take a walk. I'm going to walk the dog, or I'm going to play with the kids. And your mental state changes. You ask, or someone asks you rather, about that pain. And you say, what pain? Because now you're in a state of joy with the kids, or in a state of wonder as you walk in nature or outside and see the wonder and oneness of the divine, and your whole attitude, your whole physical presence begins to change, begins to feel different. And that is what we're looking for, and that is what Ernest is teaching when he speaks to the idea of physical perfection. Doesn't speak to the idea that sometimes we may forget who we are, what we're capable of. But what he reminds us is that when those moments occur, we should go back to this idea of spiritual and physical perfection that starts with the conscious mind and allows us to create and cultivate a new state of being right there in that moment. And so when we allow to do that, we step into this idea of a spiritual fact, what health is. And as you are inherently whole and complete. And when we step into that idea, reveal health through right thinking. And when we step into our groundbreaking tool of treatment, treatment targets belief, not body. They target beliefs, not body, because we want you to be in tune with the infinite. In tune with, it's like, you know, when you listen to a radio station or a streaming station, you have to be on the right frequency or in the right alignment to get that. And when that is, you are inherent whole and complete. The analogy works perfectly with the old-fashioned radio, where you had to dial up the station. You had to get at the right alignment so that the frequency, so that the energy, so that the music came through the physical apparatus, the radio, so that you could tune in to what was being said or what was being sung. And so by changing our beliefs and thoughts to a positive way of looking at our bodies, of looking at ailments, of recovering from a setback, we can reveal our inherent wholeness, right? Because Holmes says this. Holmes says healing is a philosophy. As a philosophy, it is not about fixing something that's broken. It's not about fixing something that's broken, but about revealing the perfection that is already present beneath the false belief or the false idea. It is uncovering of truth, not the adding of something new, right? We do not will the body to perfection. We know that it is already perfect. We know that, you know, they ask some of the greatest sculptors, when they had this big hunk of rock or wood or whatever they were carving or chiseling to make this image. And they said, I just revealed what was already in the rock, what was already in the stone, what was already in the wood. That image was already there. It just needed to be revealed. Certain things need to be taken away. False ideas, fears, bad habits or bad practices, if you will. When that happened, the inherent wholeness of the thing itself revealed. It became present. It was known. It was seen. And so we take this idea that health is a spiritual fact. Health is something that we work towards. Ernest says this. Ernest says, healing then is accompanied by uncovering, neutralizing, and erasing false images of thought and letting the perfect idea reflect itself through subjective mind into the body. That's on page 197, the third paragraph on that page. He speaks clearly about what healing and health is right there. It's about uncovering these things that have somehow now crept into our belief system and affected our body. So I want to stop right there and see if there's any, if anybody has any comments as we continue here and get ready to turn the corner on this topic today. So anything, okay. And so now as we move forward, we begin to look at what are some of the tools to shift our consciousness, to align our physical practices and our bodies in a way of healing, in a way of allowing ourselves to be more than we think we can be or thought we were. And that begins with using these healing tools, right? And that's, as we said earlier, utilizing spiritual mind treatment or prayer. Goes by many names, but it is we call it a spiritual mind treatment because we know we are treating a consciousness that may not be in alignment. So that's why it's a treatment. We're treating that misalignment of consciousness. And then we can use visualization practice for this healing because it sets that image in mind. It begins to cultivate this picture. And we incorporate meditation and affirmation as the salve that we put on the injury that needs some reinforcements, that needs some adherence to that divine mind. These are tools of healing, starting with prayer. It starts in the mind. The practice of realizing physical perfection in affirmative prayer. Spiritual mind treatment, as we know, declares that spiritual truth of wholeness and denies any belief in illness or imperfection. Any illness or imperfection. And so when we're able to align with that divine reality, these techniques of prayer and visualization and meditation and affirmation are tools that allow us to continue. You know, like if anyone has ever had a injury that required them to go to a physical therapist, you start out, they give you some very simple things to increase your movement. Then the next thing they do, they add a little something else, add a little more weight, a little more tension, and they add a little more until eventually the wholeness of that is back. Whatever that ailment or injury had caused is back. And a good therapist will tell you, you have to begin to see yourself healed. You have to see yourself making the movement. And that's what we do when we use these healing tools. We begin to open up a way of living, a way of expressing ourselves so that we can actualize this perfect health, this perfect body that we are. And so once we do that, we have to begin to affirm it. Right? We talked about affirmation there, but the anchor, once we've changed our mind and we thought it and we prayed it and we've aligned, then we must move into this idea of affirmative practice. Once we have to affirm it. Once we've declared it, then we affirm it. The life of God flows through me. Feel, believe, and embody that affirmation. Regularly practice strengthens the belief. It cultivates the mind. It enhances the spirit. It moves us forward in this idea of wholeness and perfection. I know I'm guilty of it. I'll say my prayers and treatments in the morning, and then sometimes I get so caught up in the day, I forget. And when I do, I suffer, right? But when I can remember, I have a reminder, and now we have the ultimate reminder in our cell phones or our smart speakers. We can just set a time on our phone or our smart speakers and say, give me a reminder to do a 2-minute visualization, to do a 2-minute. We have that available to do this, to keep cultivating that mind and keep realizing the connection between us and the divine. And so this is how we begin to reveal the healing, by using all of the tools that work together to remind us of wholeness, to remind us of oneness, to remind us of our connection to the divine source where all things are perfect. So my challenge, if you will, with everyone, and take your smartphone, That's the better one because you got it with you all the time. Your smart speaker may not be there. It might just be in your office or in your living room or your bedroom. But if you got your cell phone, you take your cell phone and you set a reminder for however you need. If 12 o'clock is your stressful point, then you set a reminder. 12 o'clock, remind me to do a 2-minute guided visualization or have an affirmation to repeat. And I like this guided visualization idea. And so I want to bring forward this idea. Practice daily a 2-minute healing visualization. Visualize divine light healing every cell. And then release false beliefs for radiant health. If you could do it twice a day, we're only talking 2 minutes. 2 minutes, if you're in a meditation or visualization, 2 minutes may seem like 2 hours. But it's 2 minutes, and you will be surprised and amazed at what that idea of changing your mental state, changing your thought about your body and healing and wholeness and perfection, and how it makes a difference. I mean, you could do this 3-4 times a day and you ain't done 10 minutes. We spend 10 minutes just scrolling on a TikTok or Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever social media we might be utilizing to feel connected. But the best connection is this visualization I would submit. And Ernest says, where is that statement? Ernest says this: scientific mental healing is the result of clear thinking and logical reasoning. It's on page 203. Page 203 at the bottom of the page under healing is clear thinking. Who doesn't want to think clearly? Given all the stresses of the day, given all the demand that we have today, who does not want to think clearly about what we're doing and where we're going and how we're living? So let's try to add this. Start with just 2 minutes a day, somewhere in the middle of the day, to take a 2-minute break to do a healing visualization where we see the divine light touching and healing and transforming every cell of our body. And in that process, we begin to release any false beliefs about who we are or what we are or whose we are. And we begin to align with the divine mind to create an atmosphere, an environment where we allow perfect physical perfection to be revealed. And so as we get ready to bring this to an end, I'm going to stop here and see if anyone has any questions, anyone has any comments or statements about healing or perfection or any of that, and how this process works. Because this is a foundational idea. Because if our body temple is not operating in an optimal way, it affects the mind. There's a wholeness going on, right? And we have to sometimes put the brakes on and recalibrate with mental treatment, with affirmation, with visualization, and the changing of our mind. Ernest said, change your thinking and change your life. And that's what we're talking about right here, right now. Changing your thinking and changing your life. And so with that, we want to step right now into this idea of integration, of this idea of practical integration. So get a journal and begin to do the work. Journal. What belief am I ready to release that may be obstructing my physical perfection? Engage in a daily mental self-care practice, that little 2-minute visualization of healing. Do it as many times as necessary. And then begin to journal what happened, what you feel. Again, this whole process could take 5 minutes. Do a 2-minute visualization, do a 3-minute idea of writing what happened, and keep track so that you begin to see that these principles work, that they're not just some random ideas or some thing that we're spouting about that doesn't work. They work if you work it. They work if you work it, and they go hand in hand. So let's find a little time to do some practical integration here. Do that 2-minute visualization. Light healing, breathing, holding the breath for a second, and then blowing out to create that flow of divine energy and alignment and visualization to begin to shift our ideas, and then release whatever beliefs we may have about what somebody said about our physical condition, whatever it is. And then when you're done with that little simple 5 minutes, treat yourself and others with love. Love is a conduit of energy that just flows. Again, try it for yourself. Think of a situation where you felt happy and loved and was loving, and compare that to a situation where you were not, and how your body responded or felt to both of those situations. This teaching is magnificent if we apply it. Ernest came up with this idea of religious science because he understood that spirituality and science are two sides of a coin. They both hold and support each other when we can free our minds of any concepts that they're not. And so what we're looking to do with these Science of Mind lectures on Saturday and the teachings of these magnificent properties and tools and approaches to life is to do it and to share it. Because we know, again, when two or more gather, the energy is increased. So get a prayer partner, get a physical accountability partner, get an eating accountability partner, right? So that we can encourage one another to our perfection, to reveal that perfection. And so as we end, there's a couple of takeaways that we want to just remind ourselves about. And that is this: health is our spiritual wealth. Health is our spiritual wealth. Our spiritual wealth is our health. That affirmation can be read both ways. Direct your mind wisely to create form. Direct your mind wisely to create your body. Don't be down on yourself because you may have gained 1 or 2 pounds, or don't down yourself because you don't look like you used to look, or you can't do what you used to do. Used to bees don't make no honey. Current bees make honey. And that's what we want to deal with, the current. We want to make this honey of life, this nectar of life, real right now, and live from the truth of being whole. Live from the truth of being whole, because that's where it's at. That's exactly where it's at. And so when we look at these takeaways, ideally they reinforce that health is fundamentally a spiritual idea, encouraging us to monitor is not the right word, to be specific about the images and the words and things that we do to create wholeness. Ernest's concept of perfection, of physical perfection, is that each person, as an expression of the divine, has an inherent wholeness that is spiritual in origin. The body can be restored to health by aligning our thoughts with this spiritual truth through conscious, mental, and spiritual practices. And that's what we're trying to lay out here. this idea of understanding and then acting on that understanding. Acting on that understanding. And so, this has been the Saturday Science of Mind conversations. I'm Rev Z. As always, it's my pleasure to be here to help us all, because each time I do one of these, I remind myself of what it takes and what it is. And so we've been looking at chapter 14, physical perfection, on page 190 through 214. So go get the book, pull it out, read a little bit, begin to align with these ideas, so that we know that with the power and presence of God, the divine mind, the source of all things that goes by many, many names, we will be able to tap into that power and align ourselves to be the best that we can be. And so I would like to just close with a short treatment. So if everybody just take everything out their lap, put their feet firmly on the ground, and uncross your hands to allow that divine energy to flow. And so right here, we take a breath. And we feel the energy of the divine in that syncopated in and out, that flow of life that allows us to realize who we are. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And so when we can align those two entities together, when we can realize the truth of that and set the conscious intention of perfection, these laws that we teach, these laws that we speak about, automatically begin to activate. They begin to transform. They begin to heal. They begin to create an environment that is supportive of wholeness, of completion, of the presence of God itself. And so we take this information, we take these practices, we take these lessons, and we take this energy and idea of health and wholeness to heart, and we begin to apply it in our lives and share it with others to increase the energy, to increase the boundaries, to increase the flow. And so I know right here, right now, that for myself and anyone that's on this call now, or anyone that hears it later, that our bodies are being awakened at the very cellular level to transform, to take in that healing light, to transform everything into its perfection. And by transform, I mean transforming our minds to be the revealers of truth and wholeness and health. And so I am just so grateful to be able to speak this word, to open up this vortex of light and love and energy for each and every one of us. And I am grateful. And it is in that gratefulness that I release these words, knowing that they're already in effect, they're already activating in our lives, that we may be better today than we were yesterday because of these ideas, these treatments, and this state of being that allows us to say yes to life. And so it is, amen. And so it is, amen. And I want to thank you for being with us today. As always, come back often. Every Saturday, if you can go to the www.ntmedia.org, and you can look at previous versions of this and lessons. And so continue to support, continue to join us, continue to tell your friends, because this is the story of your life. And so with that, I wish you farewell. Have a great Sunday and Saturday first and Sunday tomorrow as we continue this week and begin the next week. And so it is. Amen.